You overthink every text. Silence feels like rejection. Love feels alive, but also like danger. It's not that you're broken, it's that your nervous system still believes closeness means loss. In this video, we'll uncover the childhood wound behind anxious attachment and how to finally break free. You already know the feeling even if you never had the name for it. The small pauses in conversation stretch into abysses that make your chest tighten. The space between one reply and the next becomes unbearable, as if silence itself were proof that you are about to be abandoned. What should be ordinary, harmless gaps in human interaction turn into a battlefield inside your mind. You rehearse possible mistakes, replay every word you sent, wonder if you were too much, too quiet, too needy, too distant. Even joy is not free, because underneath it runs the constant current of dread. What if it ends? What if they leave? What if I am left alone again? This is the cage of anxious attachment, invisible to the world but suffocating to live inside. And when love finally arrives, when someone does choose you, the relief is so overwhelming that it feels like intoxication. You pour yourself into them, hoping this time will be different. For a while, you even convince yourself it is. But then the old fear stirs again. You wake in the night, scanning for signs of distance. You watch their tone shift, or you imagine it shifting. You feel the fragility of the bond before anything has actually happened, as if your body were already preparing for the ending. And the tragedy is that this hypervigilance, born of the need to hold on, is the very thing that begins to erode the intimacy you crave. The more you cling, the more strained the connection becomes. The more you try to secure love, the more it slips away. What most people never see is how this pattern extends beyond romance. At work, you feel the same urgency to prove yourself, as if recognition is always one mistake away from vanishing. With friends, you give and give, but underneath is the unspoken terror that if you stop giving, they will disappear. Even in family, you sense that your belonging is fragile, something you must maintain by pleasing, performing, smoothing over conflict. Anxious attachment does not only shape your love life, it shapes the very lens through which you see every relationship, every bond, every fragile tie to another human being. It is a constant waiting for the other shoe to drop, a life lived in anticipation of loss. The cruelest part of this cycle is how invisible it is to others. On the outside, you may look strong, functional, even confident. You keep the mask on well enough that few people suspect the storm inside. But when you're alone, the facade cracks. You replay conversations, search for hidden rejection, and punish yourself for not being calmer, cooler, more secure. You may even shame yourself for having these feelings at all, believing you should know better by now. And yet, no matter how much awareness you have, no matter how many times you tell yourself it's irrational, your nervous system pulls you back into the loop. Awareness doesn't dissolve the fear, it only highlights how trapped you feel inside it. There are moments, though, when you catch yourself asking, why does this feel so overwhelming? Why does silence pierce like a knife? Why do I cling even when I know it pushes people away? These questions point toward the truth, that this is not just a personality flaw or insecurity. It is the nervous system remembering something old, something primal. It is your body still acting as if love is fragile, as if safety is conditional, as if the smallest misstep could cost you everything. This is why logic alone cannot free you. You cannot simply decide to trust more or relax. The bond was written into your system long before you had words for it, and the cage was built in a time when survival truly did depend on closeness. And so the struggle continues. You long for intimacy, yet when it arrives, you are consumed by the fear of losing it. You crave love, yet when you hold it, you begin bracing for its absence. You tell yourself that next time will be different, that the right person will finally dissolve the fear. But the truth is harsher. Until you face the wound itself, every relationship becomes another echo of the same story. Not because you are cursed, but because your body is still living inside the vow it once made. That love cannot be trusted, that safety is temporary, that closeness will always hurt. And here is where I want you to pause and recognize something vital. If you feel this in your life, it is not weakness, And it is not madness, it is survival. It is your inner child's way of keeping you from the devastation you once felt. What looks like desperation is actually loyalty. What looks like overthinking is actually vigilance. What looks like too much is actually the body's ancient attempt to protect you from loss. When you see it this way, you begin to understand. The cage was not built to punish you, it was built to keep you alive. To understand why your present feels so fragile, you have to return to the past you may have never consciously remembered. There was a time when your need for love was pure and instinctive. As a child, you reached out with small hands, wide eyes, and open trust. You didn't calculate your worth. You didn't ask whether you deserved attention. You simply needed it, and in the world of a child, that need was as essential as air. But what you found may not have been steady. Love came in fragments, warm one day, cold the next. A parent's affection was given when you behaved, withdrawn when you cried too loud, too long, or at the wrong moment. Even the smallest inconsistencies carved themselves into your nervous system, teaching you that safety was always temporary, and that closeness could vanish without warning. It is important to realize that this was not about cruelty alone. Sometimes the wound was carved by well-meaning parents too stressed or wounded themselves to offer consistent care. A father buried in his own shame. A mother pulled into cycles of exhaustion, numbness, or fear. They loved in their way, but their love wavered in a rhythm your body could not control. And the child within you learned quickly. To keep love close, you must adapt. To avoid abandonment, you must perform. This was not weakness, it was intelligence. It was your earliest survival code. Inside that code lived a vow. Perhaps it sounded like, "I will not show too much need, or they will leave." Perhaps it whispered, "If I am perfect, maybe they will stay." Or even, "If I never relax, I can prevent the hurt from coming." These vows were not spoken aloud, but they were etched deep into your nervous system. They became the invisible rules that governed your behavior. And because they worked, because they allowed you to endure the pain of inconsistency without breaking, they became sacred. Even now, decades later, your body still clings to them as if they were law. Imagine yourself as that child, standing in a doorway, sensing the mood in the room before stepping inside. You learned to scan for signs of safety. You learned to feel when the air shifted, when words carried an undertone, when love was about to vanish. That scanning became second nature. Today, you call it overthinking. But back then, it was how you stayed alive in an unpredictable world. The vigilance that now torments you once saved you. Without it, you could not have navigated the shifting terrain of your earliest bonds. The tragedy is that these vows, though brilliant in childhood, do not dissolve when you grow. Instead, they become the very bars of the cage you now live in. You keep rehearsing them without realizing. You text too often, not because you're flawed, but because your child self still believes closeness must be maintained at all costs. You panic at silence, not because you are irrational, but because once silence did mean abandonment. You cling to people who pull away, not because you love the chase, but because your body remembers that inconsistent love is better than no love at all. These patterns are not random. They are echoes of the child who learned to survive. And here lies the most important truth. It was never your fault. You did not choose the inconsistency. You did not ask for the absence. You did not decide that your worth should be tied to someone else's shifting affection. Those were the circumstances you inherited, the rules you absorbed long before you had language to name them. Too often, people with anxious attachment blame themselves endlessly, convinced they are broken, needy, or defective. But the reality is softer, and also more piercing. You are not broken. You are loyal. Loyal to the child who once stood at the edge of love and vowed never to be caught off guard again. So when you wonder why you still live this cycle, remember, the roots run back to a time when you had no choice. Your nervous system is not betraying you. It is keeping its promise. It is honoring the vow you once made. I will do whatever it takes not to be left again. And until that vow is seen for what it is, not weakness, not madness, but survival, the cycle will continue to write itself into your relationships. The key is not to break yourself down for repeating it, but to finally see the child who set it in motion, and to recognize that their vow, while once sacred, no longer serves the life you are living today. When you look at your life today, you may wonder why something as small as a delayed message or an unread text can throw you into a storm of panic. Logically, you know it shouldn't matter, but your body does not live in logic. Your nervous system still interprets silence as abandonment, still confuses distance with danger. That is why your chest tightens, your thoughts spiral, and your sense of worth crumbles the moment someone you love withdraws. It isn't about the phone screen. It isn't about the hours between replies. It is about a body that still lives in the memory of inconsistency, bracing for the loss it once endured. This impact doesn't only play out in romance. In friendships, you may find yourself giving more than you receive, overextending to keep the connection alive. You say yes when you mean no. You lend time, energy, and care even when you are running empty. And yet underneath, you are terrified that if you stop, if you pause for even a moment, the bond will break. You keep the friendship afloat at the cost of yourself, not realizing that what you call generosity is often fear in disguise, fear that if you stop performing, you will vanish from their heart entirely. At work, the pattern wears a different mask but feels eerily the same. You push yourself harder than anyone else, striving for perfection, terrified of failure. Praise feels fleeting, criticism feels catastrophic, and no matter how much you achieve, there is a quiet whisper underneath it all. It's still not enough. You cannot rest because rest feels like a risk. If you let your guard down, you imagine the ground will crumble. This is why burnout follows you like a shadow. The anxious attachment doesn't only attach you to people. It attaches you to proving, to striving, to performing endlessly. Even in your body, the effects are visible. Sleepless nights where your mind runs through imaginary scenarios, rehearsing conversations that never happened, predicting outcomes that never come true. A restless stomach when intimacy feels too close, as if love itself stirs a primal fear. Tension in your shoulders, racing in your chest, trembling in your hands. All of it the language of a nervous system that has never felt truly safe. What others call overreacting is actually your body reliving the old wound, unable to tell the difference between past danger and present connection. Spiritually, the anxious attachment can even shape the way you approach healing itself. You may chase meditation, affirmations, or self-help with the same desperation you chase relationships, hoping that if you just do enough, you will finally feel whole. But even the spiritual path becomes another stage for the same vow. If I don't do this perfectly, I will be left behind. You may read about peace but never taste it. You may seek freedom but find yourself trapped in the same cage, painted with spiritual language but built of the same fear. The cruelest impact is that the cycle convinces you it is love. You mistake the racing heart, the panic, the chasing for passion. You believe that the intensity is proof of connection, when in truth it is proof of survival repeating itself. Real love is calm, steady, and secure, but because your body never learned that, the calm feels foreign, even boring. You chase the storm because the storm is familiar. And until this is seen, you will keep calling chaos home, not realizing it is only the echo of your childhood vow. If any part of this feels like your story, know this: you are not alone. Countless others live this same cycle, mistaking fear for love and anxiety for devotion. But speaking it aloud breaks the silence. If these words stirred something in you, let it echo below. Share what part of this pattern feels most familiar. Sometimes naming it as the first step to loosening its grip, because when you give voice to your truth, the child inside no longer has to carry it in secret. When you begin to see anxious attachment not as your flaw, but as your body's survival map, the first shift happens quietly. Compassion. For years you may have judged yourself. Why can't I just relax? Why do I ruin every relationship? But the truth is, your nervous system has only been trying to protect you. Healing begins when you stop fighting yourself and instead listen to the signals. Every spiral of overthinking, every ache in your chest, every urge to chase, they are not punishments, they are messages. Messages that say, I am still afraid. I am still waiting for safety. When you recognize this, you move from shame into understanding, and from understanding into the possibility of change. The next step is presence. Anxiety thrives in the future. The fear of what might happen, the terror of being left, the obsession with controlling outcomes. Presence is what interrupts the cycle. It may be as simple as noticing your breath when panic rises, or feeling your feet on the ground when fear tells you you're floating away. These small anchors remind your body, I am here now. I am not abandoned in this moment. Over time, this practice rewires the nervous system, teaching it to distinguish between the ghosts of the past and the reality of now. Another doorway is truth-telling. So often, anxious attachment drives us into silence. We swallow our needs, terrified that voicing them will push others away. But healing requires you to experiment with honesty, however small. Telling a friend, I feel anxious when I don't hear from you. Saying to a partner, sometimes I worry you'll leave me. These are not demands, they are bridges. Every time you speak your truth and the world doesn't collapse, your body learns safety in connection. This is how intimacy begins to shift from danger to sanctuary. And there is another secret. What fuels anxious attachment is not only fear of loss, but loss of joy. Without joy, love becomes only vigilance, a constant scanning for danger. That is why part of healing is reclaiming the energy of play, of aliveness. In fact, this is the doorway I opened in another teaching. The inner child's secret to reclaiming joy and finally feeling whole. In that video, I reveal why numbness follows us even into successful lives, and why reconnecting with joy is not optional but essential to healing. You'll find the link in the description below. Think of it not as the next video, but as the next room in the same labyrinth. As you integrate these steps, remember, healing anxious attachment is not about becoming fearless overnight. It is about becoming curious. When panic arises, instead of asking how do I stop this, you begin to ask what is this showing me? When you notice the urge to chase, you pause and wonder, what part of me still believes love will vanish if I don't hold on tight? These questions open space between the fear and your response, and in that space, freedom begins to grow. With time, your body learns a new rhythm. The silence that once felt unbearable becomes a chance to breathe. The space between you and another no longer screams you are being abandoned, but whispers you are still safe. You begin to attract connections that feel calmer, steadier, and instead of mistaking them for boredom, you start to recognize them as love. The nervous system, once wired only for vigilance, begins to recognize safety as its home. And perhaps most beautifully, you realize you don't have to choose between love and survival anymore. The old vow dissolves. The child who once equated intimacy with danger finally learns. Closeness can feel safe, tenderness can mean protection, and love can arrive without disappearing. This is the path of healing anxious attachment, not a straight line, but a return to the place where love and safety can finally live side by side. There comes a moment in every healing journey when the story you've been telling yourself begins to dissolve. You've spent years believing that your anxious attachment was proof of your weakness, evidence that you were somehow broken. But the truth is softer, kinder, and far more powerful. You were never broken. You were simply loyal to a child who once vowed never to be left again. Every time you clung tighter, every time you panicked at silence, every time you begged for love that kept slipping away, you were not failing, you were remembering the vow. And now, for the first time, you can see it for what it is. A vow made in fear can finally be released in love. The shift does not happen in one dramatic breakthrough. It happens in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. The moment you let your body breathe instead of rushing to check your phone. The moment you speak your truth without apologizing for being too much. The moment you allow someone's love in without waiting for it to vanish. These are not small victories. They are revolutions in the nervous system, proof that you are teaching your body a new story. Every repetition plants a seed of safety where there was once only fear. Perhaps right now you feel a stirring, a recognition that these words are echoing something inside you. If that's true, don't let it pass in silence. Share it. Put it into words. Let the comments below become a mirror where your truth can be spoken, because the moment you name what lives in you, it no longer hides in the dark, and your story, yes, yours, may be the exact sign someone else has been waiting to see. When you look at your anxious attachment now, it may feel less like a curse and more like a compass. It pointed you to the wound that needed your attention, the part of you that longed not just for love, but for safety inside love. Without it, you might never have gone searching. Without it, you might still believe that the panic was your identity. But now you know better. The panic was never you, it was only the echo of a child's fear, and echoes fade when the original voice is finally heard. So here is the choice before you. You can keep chasing, clinging, and panicking, hoping that someone else's love will quiet the storm. Or you can pause, listen inward, and remember that the storm was never meant to destroy you, it was meant to wake you. The moment you see this, the grip loosens, the attachment softens. What once felt like chains begins to feel like a doorway, and on the other side is not perfection but peace. You have carried this weight long enough. It is time to set it down. Not to forget the child who made the vow, but to hold them close and whisper, "We are safe now. We don't need to beg anymore. We don't need to chase anymore. We can love without fear and be loved without disappearing." That is the secret anxious attachment never wanted you to know. That you were already enough, already worthy, already whole. And if these words found you, it was never by chance. Stay close. Subscribe so that the next step in this journey is not missed. Your inner child will keep speaking. Walk with us as we listen together.